Hello and welcome to the Let's Get Mental podcast. I'm your host, Archie, and joining me is Bry. You can say hello.
Hello.
Yep, I was about to say you can say hello. And also joining me is Hanniya.
Hi.
So on today's podcast, we are going to be focusing on A-level and GCSE results. Obviously, recently, obviously because of COVID, exams were cancelled on the 18th of March, and obviously recently grades have come out for A-level results on the 13th of August and for GCSE on the 20th of August. So in today's podcast, we're going to be sort of discussing and diving into this a bit about our feelings, our perspectives on it, how exams were for us when we did them, and also obviously we've got Hanniya here as well, who's actually done her A-level results quite recently. We want to hear her perspective on the on how it's been for her as well. So we're going to move on to our first topic, and which is like the pressure of sitting several exams, and also how teacher pressure can be involved. So I guess, how does the idea of sitting 10 to 20 exams, or, it doesn't even matter if it's not 10 to 20, how many exams you may be doing at the time, how does it make you feel? So, I mean, does anyone want to start? I'm very happy to start if, no one else is willing to. That's absolutely fine. I'm ready to start. So, for me, exams were never easy, and I think it was always a pressure that, like, more is better. They always sort of try to force you to do as many exams as possible. I mean, especially when doing GCSEs, it's a sort of big shock to you when they come on, because you're so used. I mean, for me, year 8, I think, was when I wasn't doing any, I didn't have to bother about doing GCSEs or anything like that. But as soon as I got into year 9, this whole sort of pressure comes onto you straight away that, like, look, you've got to actually, get down doing work now. You can't mess around in class anymore. You've actually got to commit yourself to doing well. And that, I didn't really mind that. But the problem is, unless you have, I mean, for someone like me who was dyslexic, unless I had the right support, I just found this incredibly daunting and hard. Like, this is it's so much to throw on, quite a young person at that age, especially, as a teenager. And the worst thing is, they people make, the teachers especially, they make you feel like this is everything. And as I say, for the thought of doing 10 to 20 exams and revising for all those is absolutely horrible. Like, I don't know how, well, as I say, I don't know how I coped. I didn't really cope in the end of it. I just think the pressure just really got to me, and it was just extremely difficult. But I think that's how, it can be, especially, just, I think what hurt me the most was just like when you see friends of yours who somehow cope with it so easily. That was what was really shocking to me. But I mean, how was your guys' experiences with exams?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
It's
oh,
all right. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll go to one. So, Bri, do you want to start?
yeah, go on then. So I think for me, I was actually in hospital for a lot of year 10. I was out of school for 2 months, but I was incredibly lucky that I am, and I'll openly admit that I'm a very academic person. Exams for me are, sorry to be that person, but exams don't phase me too much. Obviously, I know the stress of sitting 10 to 20 exams, maybe that's even a little bit too much for me. Um, but I think that the fact that everything came down to, a couple of weeks at the end of, so you do 3 years of learning and a couple of weeks at the end. Obviously, as I say, for me, it wasn't as bad, but I know a lot of my friends really struggled, and it was kind of confusing for me, especially I think during GCSEs, where I didn't quite understand that not everyone was the same and everyone learns differently. There are a lot of my friends that are really good at coursework, or really, really good at like performing and performing arts and those things, and they were able to succeed in different ways to me. Um, as I say, I was very lucky that the mainstream kind of school is set up in a way that is to my advantage. But I see a lot of people who really struggled through that. And I think that was really difficult to wrap my head around, because I think for a long time I thought, oh, I'm obviously just better than other people, and I'm really not. It's just that other people learn and show their knowledge and their talents in various different ways.
So,
I think A levels is very different, but I'm not sure what Hanya thinks.
well, I was just wanted to ask Hanya, because obviously, Hanya, you've obviously had to prepare. I mean, I assume you've had to revise for your exams during
Mm.
lockdown as well, which has obviously been hard enough. Obviously, there's distractions there at home, but how many exams were you revising for your A levels?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a it was a strange situation for me, because with A levels, so as you know, we went into lockdown, what was it, like towards the end of March?
Yeah.
And at that point, we were all sort of going full force, like revision. We had exams in like May, and we were coming to the end of our like syllabuses and all of our courses. And all of that. So it was full on like exams are coming. I would have had, so just for reference, I did maths, physics, and art. So I was quite lucky because with art, we didn't have an exam as such. It was just like a 15-hour practical component and coursework mainly. And then I had 3 exams for physics and 3 for maths. So I was lucky in that sense that I had fewer than a lot of my friends. Um, so that's how many I was going to have. And then with lockdown, obviously all of that got shut down. So we were all sort of like, okay, we're gonna revise from home. So that was like the first sort of mindset that we were in for like the initial couple of weeks. And then the A-level exams obviously got cancelled. And then that was like a whole new sort of curveball. So for me, it was the last big exams that I like faced, like the pressure of revising and all of that. Those were probably my January mock exams. Um, and just exactly what Bry said, and this is something that I felt for GCSEs and for A levels, it's very, it depends on how you learn. And I feel like, you know, the system is very much focused, as Bry said again, on like a certain type of learner or individual. So again, I was quite lucky because I had that element of coursework with my art course, and then obviously like more traditional revision with maths and physics,
Did,
so I
did
could kind of do both.
Sorry, just to ask, did you find that easier then? Did you find that actually
Mm.
working at home and actually doing it yourself and doing the coursework was a bit easier than maybe actually going to lectures?
Yeah, definitely. Like I've always said this, like art was like my go-to like break lesson, mental break in a sense, like because I was still obviously doing work, but it wasn't personally, I found it less strenuous because it was coursework and you could do it in your own time. Um, but obviously it counted the same as like my other A levels. Um, but with regards to the idea of sitting 10 to 20 exams, that sort of takes me back to like GCSEs where you have like 9 or 10 subjects and you have to sit like 3, if not more, exams for each subject. Um, and again, with that as well, it's like, you know, with GCSE, there's such a wide array of subjects. And again, everyone has different strengths and things. So it is quite a lot of pressure, as you say, on someone who is at that stage in their life where you have so many other anxieties and things as well. So it is big, big pressure.
I think obviously there's quite a difference between the GCSEs and the A levels because when GCSE years you're still kind of a teenager. You still kind of want to, you're still at that age where you might, want to enjoy your free time quite a bit. And I know a
Mm.
lot of people who obviously were doing their GCSEs through lockdown that revising, doing, they're doing their work at home it's just not an option. It just wasn't going to happen because obviously a lot of them at home, there's too many distractions. And I think obviously the other thing that I want to ask, actually want to hear your opinion on as well, is, teachers. Obviously lockdown was something very, very new for teachers. It was obviously
Mm.
something that they've had to adapt it to. And this is the thing with GCSE students. I am curious to know if they actually got the support they needed from their teachers, because there's no way, in my opinion, that teachers teaching kids on Skype, or teenagers on Skype, or young people on Skype or Zoom or whatever, has been as effective as teaching in the classroom. Maybe it has been. I mean, I don't exactly know. But for you, did you find that you got the support you needed from your teachers or who was ever teaching you the subjects you were doing? Do you find they were reaching out to you and you didn't have to reach out to them? They were actually open and helping you.
Yeah, so undoubtedly, I think it's not the teaching and learning experience is won't be to the same level of detail or to the same level as it is in like a face-to-face environment in an actual classroom, because of physical limitations as well. So if you need help with something, it is harder to reach out in like the sense of asking an individual question, getting a personalized response. There's a lot more sort of blanketed teaching. So by that I mean like video tutorials or lessons, rather than one-to-one support. And again, there's only so much teachers can do about this as well, because there are physical limitations and things like that. And I was talking to some of my friends as well, and it also varies a lot from sort of school to school, institution to institution, depending on the resources available. So I know some people who feel like they have sort of kept up to date with any work that they've missed, whereas there's other people, especially in the years below me, who are just going into their final year of GCSE or A level, who feel like they've really missed out because their school just didn't have like the resources to provide like the perfect kind of, enough teaching to keep up to date with their courses. And then it also sort of goes into like the disparity within like young people and their circumstances. So not everyone has access to, the technology needed. So there are a lot of discrepancies within that as well, and it's not the same. The experience has not been the same for everyone throughout lockdown.
I think that's a really good point you've made there, actually, about like the access to the access, for example, computers, laptops. Not every household has that. Like, not everyone has access to Skype and Zoom. So I'm known parents that I've spoken to that have had trouble getting that want their children to learn at home during lockdown, because some of them might have asthma or other conditions, and they've obviously they can't go into school and everything like that, and they've had to try and learn from home. But yeah. I guess the thing that I've been curious about as well is obviously that some students, there are individuals who find exams exceptionally difficult, and they need obviously a little bit of help, and learning support. For example, I mean, when I did my GCSEs, I had to have learning support from my school. And I can't imagine how I would have learnt, I don't know how I would have imagined I learnt at home. Then again, I did have homeschool tutors that actually were very, very good at their jobs, and they were extremely good. But when I did my exam, I had to have a scriber. So that, for those of you that don't know, a scriber is somebody who will type for what you're doing while you're doing the exam. But I think obviously this is one of the reasons why they did predicted grades, because I think they knew to a point that they couldn't. They couldn't obviously have people sit exams because of obviously COVID and such like that. So, do you guys both think that did you guys think that predicted grades was a good idea, or did you think that was a bit unfair to people, or did you think that was actually fair to a lot of people? I mean, I'll go to you, Bry, first. Do you think predicted grades was okay?
So it's a bit of a tricky one, because I understood the reasoning behind the algorithm that they had. They were trying to make sure that everybody got the fairest results possible. But I think the way that they handled it in the media and the way that it actually turned out was not okay. The fact that there was that many students disproportionately advantaged. And the fact that they did a U-turn as well shows that they realised that they'd made those mistakes. And I can't even begin to imagine the stress and uncertainty on those such as Hanniya, who were getting those results this year. And for a lot of students, it seems like your entire future is on a couple of letters on a piece of paper, and that's for it to have disproportionately affected so many students who were in positions where they weren't able to get university places or weren't able to go on to do, the careers that they wanted to do. That's so hard. And I think they started talking about how they didn't want to, have this cohort of students as being, instead of giving everyone predicted grades, they were saying that this cohort of students would be have significantly higher grades than a lot of past years. But in all honesty, as somebody from a different cohort of students who in theory would be going up against people who had their results this year for jobs and things like that, I'm just give them the predicted grades, give everybody, I'd rather, considering the stress that everyone has gone through this year and the massive amount of loss we've already had this year, just try it. I don't care if it means that they get higher grades than we ever did or whatever. Like, they deserve it for even having to go through all this. That was my point.
Hanniya, were your grades predicted?
So just to quickly explain for like listeners and anyone who doesn't know the process. So what happened this year was, um, the teachers were told that they need to set everyone's center assessed grades. So give each of their students a grade based on like, past performance, previous attainment, mock exams, and things like that. And then they were also told to rank the students in each class from like, one to like however many students, in terms of like, say someone was predicted a B, then like rank them within like the person who's the strongest in that B, and like, and so on. And then the initial plan was to send those grades through this algorithm to sort of standardize that. And the algorithm would look at your school's past performance, your past performance. There's also debate that I looked at people's areas and, like the postcode lottery and things like that. And that's really where most of like the problems happened. Because again, from personal experience, so my predicted grades before that I applied to university, they were A star AA. And then on results day, I opened my results and I saw an A star, a B, and an E. So the one of the subjects that I was predicted an A in had dropped to an E, despite like having never received an E in any of my like mocks or anything like that. So that's where the main problem was. The algorithm had sort of, just to sort of fit all the data to like the past mathematical model of how the previous cohorts did, or in previous years, they sort of really downgraded a lot of people. And that's where the problem lied. And then after the government U-turn, everyone was sort of given the center assessed grades, which were the grades that the teachers initially sort of assigned to us. And then on the topic of center assessed grades, personally, I acknowledge that they're not perfect, and they aren't, of course, standardized to the level that they usually are every year when we have that data and when students have sat the exams, because, teachers are different, schools are different, the ways of doing things are different. But I do feel that within the current circumstances, that's the best that they could have done. I can't see any other fairer way of doing it, because again, at the end of the day, your teachers are the ones who've taught you, they know you, and they do sort of, they did look at a lot of data to sort of give those grades, and I feel like those grades were probably more accurate than any algorithm that could have given them.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, for me personally, like, I haven't done my A levels or GCSEs in COVID, but I know that like you said, like it depends how well the teacher really knows you, I think, and obviously sees how you're being assessed. I know that obviously some teachers can sort of have it out for certain students, obviously, and in a sense, obviously, I think this brings us on to another point that we want to discuss. Is obviously, is there pressure from teachers to actually do well? Obviously in I think there's more in GCSE than A levels personally, because I think that for teachers, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some teachers out there who really do care about their students. They really want them to succeed and for their benefit, for the students' benefit. But there are a few teachers who I've known who really force it and sort of drill it into you that these exams mean everything to you, and that if you don't get them done, then you're going to really struggle. But then again, a lot of these students were at home during COVID, and they haven't obviously had to deal with the sort of maybe the pressure from the teachers as much, especially with obviously predicted grades and such. So maybe it hasn't been as bad, but obviously for previous generations that have done the exams, I know that it can be very stressful. But Bry, for you, were exams a pressure thing? Obviously, you say that you actually found exams quite easily, which I'm very jealous of. But someone like me who would grasp at the idea of ever getting a C. But no, did you find that there was any ever pressure from your teachers?
So yeah, as I mentioned previously, so especially during, I think more so in GCSEs, but yeah, as I mentioned previously, I was in hospital for 2 months during year 10, which obviously is quite a critical year for your GCSEs, because that's kind of where the teaching takes place, where you learn majority of things, and then year 11 is more where it's solidifying that knowledge. But yeah, I think the pressure from a lot of teachers, as you say, it's kind of 50-50. Some teachers care more about the students and understand that as long as if the student is in the right headspace, then the work can follow. But I think the main pressure I found was that I missed quite a bit of teaching. I did have some work sent across to me whilst I was in hospital, but it wasn't the same as being in the classroom and, you know, following it at the same pace as everyone else. But I was in hospital. I was actually in a psychiatric hospital because I was having a really rough time. And when I came back out of hospital, I think a lot of teachers didn't understand that that didn't necessarily mean that I was better, and that the main thing for me was to get myself to a point where I was able to do the work, because at that point I was not able to keep up with the rest of the class. I was not yes, I may have academically been able to kind of cruise through a little bit, but I was nowhere near, you know, the point of sitting exams and actually even caring. At that point, I was really not in a great place. And the last thing on my mind was, you know, thinking about my future and getting a job and the importance of the exams and all that. So I think a lot of teachers didn't quite understand that, yes, you may think that me getting some qualifications is important, but it's never more important than, you know, my actual mental health and keeping myself sane.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think I totally agree with that. I think a lot of, I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird to say it, but I think when I was doing my GCSE, I felt like mental health was sort of a thing that was still a bit unheard of. Like it's not as nearly as known today as it was when I felt like I was doing my GCSEs. Like I think, especially for the school that I was in, I think for a lot of these teachers who are obviously a bit of an older generation, they really didn't quite understand, like, you know, how young people were feeling, how the pressure was getting to them, because I think they sort of saw it as like, you know, oh, come on, you know, get it done, sort of thing like that. But Hanniya, I mean, when you were at home, obviously, did you ever, when you were revising, did you ever find there was a bit of pressure from your teachers, or were they really supportive for you?
I think the pressure it's there to some extent. A lot of it is also, you know, pressure that you put on yourself, the pressure from parents, and all of that. There is definitely a lot of pressure. But personally, I feel like majority of the pressure that I kind of got was kind of from myself. So from the teachers, they were trying their best to be supportive. They were trying to sort of make it as easy as possible. Again, it was like a new sort of uncharted territory for them as well. But a lot of it was, I think, in hindsight, down to me as well. So having that pressure to not fall behind, to sort of stay on top of things. And you know, when you're in your home environment, you don't necessarily have like your peers or other people to sort of you know, check up on you as much, or for you to sort of take a step back, take breaks and things, and that kind of adds to it. And so, for example, when I was at home, I thought that I would have exams this summer. I remember doing like crazy hours just trying to like get it all in, because thinking that, okay, I'm not in school, but I need to get all of this done, so I need to like work twice as hard to, you know, do all of this. And being at home obviously made it worse in that sense, that I didn't have that kind of buffer of my peers to sort of be like, okay, it's okay, take a step back, that kind of thing. So I feel like working during lockdown was definitely a really big sort of hit to a lot of people's mental health. And on that note, it was the change of, again, being in that classroom environment where you are surrounded by other people who might be like, say you don't understand something, might be struggling at on the same points as you, things like that, to then being completely on your own, both like obviously physically, because, you know, I don't know where everyone revises, but I revise in my room and trying to like shut myself off from my family so I don't get distracted. But then also
sorry, go
it
on.
does feel like, oh sorry,
No, sorry, no, my mistake, go on.
but it does feel like you don't have as much support, because like online support is great, but again, it's not the same, of course, as being face to face.
So the next point that I would like us to talk about, obviously, is results, and how it makes us feel, because obviously once you've done your exam, or when they say predicted grades, you know, waiting for those results to come in through your door or online or however you get them, and you know, knowing that this could mean that the difference between getting into uni is quite a big thing, really. Or even if you're in your GCSEs, having to resit GCSEs, it can be quite a daunting thing, really, and can be really affect your mental health. For me personally, I mean, I guess I'm sort of looking at this from a different perspective, but in a sense, when I did my my GCSEs, I remember that I sort of like didn't even care what the result was, because I thought, well, because I think at that point I'd sort of been reassured by my peers and my sort of teachers and my parents as well, that like, look, it's not the end of the world. You can always redo it if that if you don't do very well. And I think that's what sort of gave me a relief. So actually, for me personally, don't get me wrong, there was definitely a sort of like worry there when waiting for the results, like, because getting them done is definitely better than having to resit them or anything like that. But I think it definitely helped knowing that they weren't everything. Really helped me sort of calm down and obviously not feel as worried when waiting for the results. Bry, for you, was waiting for your results quite a worrying thing? Did you feel like they were everything? Do you feel like they were going to be boggling down to your life? Those results when you get them.
Yeah, I think especially A levels. I kind of think when you're at GCSE level, you're not entirely sure what you want to do with your life, or I know I wasn't. But A levels, they kind of are the make or break. Well, you think they're the make or break. You've already spent half of your year 12 and year 13s applying for universities, waiting for those, whether to see if they accept you or not. Then you put it into UCAS as your first choice, and then you sit the exams, which are so incredibly stressful and crammed into such a short period of time. And then you kind of finish. You have a couple of weeks. I think I actually had about like 6-week wait between my last exam and finding out my results, and that's a long time to just sit and worry. But yeah, it's crazy. And then I think actual results day is also crazy again, because you can't sleep the night before, and then you're there with all your friends. And so we went to our school to go and pick them up in the exam hall, and you walk in and everyone's there, and you're opening these envelopes, and it's just a room full of emotion. And you look around, and there's some people crying tears of happiness, some people crying because they haven't got what they want, and it's just such a weird sensation that I can't really describe to anyone who hasn't been there. But I think for me, like Hanniya mentioned earlier, it was more personal pressure that I put on myself. I wanted to get into my first choice university. I wanted certain grades, and I was going to be disappointed if I didn't. I wanted to beat my brother in a certain I wanted to beat him at maths. But I will also say that my other brother, so I've got two brothers, my other brother, they're both older than me. He was kind of the non-academic of the family, and I will take my hat off to him that he has taught me so much in terms of that A levels aren't the be all and end all. He dropped out of A levels midway through, and he just said, it's not for me. I'm gonna find something that works, and my life path will go as it goes. And he did end up going to university with no A levels, doing something that he absolutely loves. And yeah, I think I wish I'd taken a leaf out of his book at certain times and realised that it wasn't the be all and end all.
I think that's a really good, really good sort of inspiration there. I think one thing that makes A levels, like you're saying, really bad, and I know this from my school, is that there were a lot of people in my school who were sort of obviously had friends that might be going to the same uni, or might be, just in general going to uni at the same time. And I think the pressure of knowing that your friend gets into uni before you, or you might have to spend another year, like you said, you spend a good part of a year or even more, revising and working for for these exams, and to have that sort of shoved back in your face and said that look, I'm afraid you didn't do well enough, is really, really awful. So for you, Hanniya, did you find that did you find the pressure of waiting for your results was, extremely, was it a horrible feeling? Was it a horrible feeling? Obviously, knowing that especially that they were going to be predicted. Obviously, you've told us about, that what your results were, but the leading up to that, was that truly worrying, or did you think, oh no, I know what I've been predicted, I think I'll be okay?
Personally, that was like a really bad wait for me. It was really, really stressful because, as I said, like I kind of knew my predicted grades, but that being said, I didn't know, like, again, if they were going to be dropped, if like what was happening exactly with that. And at the time, there was a lot of confusion as well around what, like, the procedure was going to be. And I think the worst thing for me, and talking to a lot of my friends as well, was just the unknown, because all the way through it wasn't very clear what was happening, and that really sort of added to the anxiety, just not knowing exactly what's happening. And then, as Bry mentioned, that sort of your first choice university depends on that, or whether you're going first choice, whether you're going second choice, and that, having that knock-on effect of like not knowing where I was going to be potentially living in the next 3 months, and just having all of those unknowns sort of buzzing around your head. And then on top of that, having like, being stuck at home, not being able to distract yourself by, going out, meeting your friends, that you'd normally do after, like, you're in your A-level summer. Like, the summer after A-levels is always bigged up, being like one of the most fun ones. But having that, like not having that, and then being at home and then having all these worries, I think that really sort of heightened it for me, and amplified it in a way.
Did you just want to ask? Did you have plans already? Did you have did you have a sort of set in your mind and think, oh right, I know that I'm going to pass. I know, like, not in a cocky way or anything like that. I don't know not the right word to use, but basically, you know that you were, a certain direction that you were going to. You thought, oh, I'm going to, this is where I want to go. I'm confident that I'm going to be going, that I'll be there by next year. But obviously this has sort of come in and sort of ruined those plans.
Yeah, so my firm and insurance choice university. My firm was obviously something that, obviously firm for a reason. I really, really wanted to go there. And since I have gotten in, thank God. And then my insurance was also like, I didn't hate it. And I would be fine there. But of course, like, after the really long process of applying to university, getting interviews and all of that, like, when you have your heart sort of set on this one goal and then you're working towards it, and then suddenly something like COVID-19 happens, and it's like, okay, no, you can't do your A-levels now, let's see. It's just that feeling of helplessness, like it's sort of taken out of your hand, the decision, and doing something about it's kind of taken out of your hand. I think that's what really got to me. Because again, I guess there's two sides of that as well, because normally when you sit your exams, you have some kind of inkling, like, okay, this exam went well, this one didn't go as well. And that in itself sort of helps you prepare mentally for like what's to come with results and what to expect. Whereas this year we had none of that because we had no exams. So in a way, I kind of use that to reassure myself, like, okay, if I don't do well at all, I can always take the exams in the autumn, because these aren't my grades necessarily. But then also just not, again, going in completely blind, that again added to like the nerves and the anxiety around it. So it was a mixed bag of emotion. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do that wait again for sure. But yeah, it was crazy.
I think obviously now I just want to talk about exams on a bit of a broader sort of spectrum now, in a sense, like, do you think it's right that we sort of stress that our GCSEs and A-level results are as important as they are? Because I think I know many people who obviously they've never gone to uni, they didn't even do A-levels, some of them haven't even done GCSEs, and they've done very well for themselves. But do you think it's our education system right now is good, in the sense that we should try and encourage people to do GCSEs and A-levels and look for a career? I mean, I'll ask Bry first again. Do you think? Do you think it's a good idea that we sort of stress this to young children, or young people? Do you think that sort of at such a young age that we should sort of explain to them and say, like, look, you must get this done? Or do you think that really our education system should be a bit more of a broader area, and that we should have other options for people at school, or even even before university, I should say.
I think obviously the process of taking GCSEs is very important. School is massive for a lot of young people, and it, teaches you skills. But I also think there are a lot of, we could do a whole other podcast on school curriculum, to be honest, because there's so many things that I think could be adapted and changed. But I think there should be a lot more taught about the different options available after school. So the fact that A levels aren't the only option, there are apprenticeships, and you can take BTECs and different kind of courses. You don't necessarily have to do your A levels straight after school. You could take a couple of years out, find what you want to do, and then take your A levels or something similar. There are access courses that allow you to go to university even if you don't have A levels. There are different jobs that don't necessarily require you to go to university. You can do in-house training for them rather than doing it at university. And I think just explaining the different options, maybe giving people more, sort of empower people more to make the decisions that work best for them, rather than trying to get people to fit a mold. So I know very much from before I even took my GCSEs, in my head, my plan was always, well, I take my GCSEs, I do my A levels, I go off to university, and then maybe even do a master's at university, because that's what my brother had done. That's what everyone I knew did. That's what I thought was the way to get the best jobs. And in all honesty, I think going to university has opened my eyes so much more, which is weird to say. But going to university has really showed me that not everyone has to go to university. It is such a weird dynamic, and it's great fun, but also I always have a phrase where I say it's the best and worst years of my life. But I love it, but it's also not for everyone, and that is totally fine. There are so many people I know that came to university, didn't like it, and are off absolutely living their best life doing something else, and that is totally fine, because everyone is different. So I think there just needs to be more there for people to make choices that work best for them, and also obviously maybe helping the mental health side of things, making sure people are in good places before making them sit their exams and things like that.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, especially the point about like the fact that when you're at school, they don't tell you that these other options. They don't tell you that, like you say, you can do the BTEC or apprenticeship. They don't tell you this thing. And I think that's partly because, like, I think our school systems have been sort of brought up in that way. They've sort of been trained in that fashion. And obviously, like you say about university, going to university, the best and worst years, like, I mean, for our parents, they could go to university without the worry of like tuition fees. But obviously for us, we've obviously got to take that into account now, and I think that's obviously why a lot of people now are sort of don't go to university nearly as much as they used to, because obviously you have to look at the financial side of it. Hanniya, is there any thoughts you'd like to give on do you think that other options should be told to people? Do you think that it shouldn't really ride down to, as I say, a piece of paper with a few grades on? Do you think people should be told that, look, this isn't everything, that you have other options, you don't have to go to university?
Yeah, definitely. And again, going back to what both of you just said, it's the fact that the options are there, that there are other things that you can do. It's just making people aware of them. Because again, when you're in sort of school and when you're going through the motions of GCSE, A levels, it does almost feel like you have like your blinkers on in a way that you can't really see like the broader options. Whereas I feel like they really should be promoted in school, because again, as you say, it's not, that kind of traditional path isn't for everyone, and people find their different skill sets are better reflected in other options. And then another point I was going to add was the sense of urgency that is often like sort of given in schools. So I remember when I was doing GCSEs and even picking my A-level subjects, that sort of thing, that okay, you need to know what you're doing, you need to pick the subjects, like this is going to be the rest of your life, you need to do it now. That kind of sense of urgency, I think, really puts a lot of pressure on the young person, and that's something that I felt as well. Whereas I think we need to, like, make sure young people know that it's okay, as Bryce said, to take a year out maybe, or to really like think about, or even just not know what you want to do, and just really explore your options. So I think that time constraint that's put on things, or that sense of urgency, can really sort of should take a step back, because that's again not great for mental health or just a young person's well-being in general.
I think that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in just a second, and I definitely agree that like there is that sort of idea that some people will go and do their GCSEs and do the A-level, go to uni without even thinking about what they're doing, and then end up actually sort of leaving in their first year because they realise that this isn't for them, and that's obviously the worst thing I think you can possibly do. And like you said, taking a year out just to sort of gather your thoughts, or even taking a few years out, do a job, get some work experience, especially with COVID right now. Actually get I find that not going straight to uni and actually maybe doing a bit of work experience is actually better, because as I say, I think people who are coming out of uni right now are obviously going to struggle to find a job because of obviously with the lack of jobs because of COVID. But I guess I want to talk right now and move on to obviously the mental health impact and how things could be improved for young people. So the exam and the result process, I think it's awful for young people's mental health. I think it really can. I mean, I like the idea of a bit of pressure. I think pressure is absolutely fine. Saying to people, look, if you do really well at this could be a really good thing for you. I really like that idea. But at the same time, I do hate the idea that for some people who just may not be right for, it can really affect them badly. Like, as I say, some people can get majorly depressed from even thinking about A levels and GCSE results, and knowing that this can mean everything in your life. I think it can really just in some sense ruin people's lives. I think there's many young people who have just given up purely because teachers and people have told them that, look, you're not doing very very well in class right now. You're not I don't think your grades are going to be up to standard. But what do you guys think on that subject, Bri? What do you think about the mental health impact that on young people's health that exams and results can do?
Yeah, I definitely think it has a huge impact on young people's mental health. And just, I think, especially at the timings of GCSEs and A levels, they span from age 14 to kind of 18 years old. That those are like crucial years in your life where you're developing as just a human being and finding out who you are.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, and just finding out who you are. So I think yeah, there's a lot going on anyway, and the exam and results process can just snowball that kind of, I think. I think there should be a lot more there to support young people's mental health. I was quite lucky that at my sixth form we had a really, really great pastoral lady who was always, watching out for us and taking us away if she could see that we were kind of getting ourselves into a bit of a state, but it still wasn't enough, I don't think.
Sorry, just to ask, what would you say could be done better to support young people's health? Well, obviously, I'll come to you, Hanniya, and obviously ask you the same two questions. But Brian, obviously, you're talking about like you said, somebody there at school. I mean, I had a very similar situation with because we obviously had houses, and somebody would be we had this really nice woman who, like you said, would look at you if you were looking a bit down or upset, and could take you in and sort of take you out of the school, and well, not take you out of the school, but take you out of the sort of classroom environment and just give you a break. But is there any ideas that you think that could be done better to actually support young people during their exam years?
In all honesty, I just think better general mental health support. So obviously we've spoken about previously, well, we touched on it in the first one about education mental health practitioners, and the presence of mental health practitioners within school, the emphasis within schools to look after your own mental health, the emphasis on talking about your feelings and talking about your emotions. And then I kind of think that everything would follow. And if people are open about talking about their emotions, talking about how they're feeling, hopefully that could in turn reduce the stresses. I don't think the stresses will ever go, because for a lot of people, exams are naturally always going to be stressful. But I think that having the support there, and again, making sure people know that it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go well. I would also possibly say the pressures on certain individuals So I think sometimes there's more pressure on, the really high flying students and maybe even the lower students, because they want the lower students to pass and they want the high flying students to do really well. And I think everyone should just be treated the same, and everyone given the same sort of positive encouragement rather than pushing people and pressuring people to do well.
So I think that's a really good point. So for you, Hanniya, I mean, did you find? I mean, obviously you can do it from a more broader scale and how you think for other people this might have been, or you can share, how you felt during lockdown about your exam and results. But it's completely up to you. But do you think that a lot of young people being in lockdown and obviously having to do their exams and wait for their results, do you think it's really affected a lot of people's mental health?
I think it has definitely. This is something that sort of affects young people across the board, and in previous years. But I think this year, especially because having been through it myself, I've seen that it's affected me definitely. Because again, going back to my experience of results day, that in itself was such a stressful experience because, again, as I mentioned earlier, just not getting the grades that I needed initially and feeling like, not knowing what my next step would be, not knowing what my options were necessarily. Um, it's almost like a sense of helplessness. And in a way, there are, people to support you. As you say, like my school had a pastoral team there, and there are helplines and there's loads of things that you can do when you're in that situation or if you're feeling overwhelmed in general. But I think a lot of it is also down to like signposting young people to these services, or like, the resources that are available. And it's like, we're always sort of told that mental health is a big thing and, we need to look after our mental health, etc. But I think the make or break is when a young person is going through that and they are like feeling at their lowest point, if they know what to do at that point. So when we are sort of promoting mental health services or, saying that this is what you need to do if you are feeling low, we need to make sure that we have like sort of action plans or like, I don't know, helplines or things that like practical things that young people can do when they are, at their lowest point. And then I guess then on a more broader perspective, part of it comes down to societal change as well. And I know that's not something that you can change overnight, but the sort of pressure to the quite traditional view of like, do well in A-levels, go to university, get a good job, that kind of thing. Traditionally, I feel like that's put a lot of pressure on young people. Again, going back to like thinking that that's the only way forward and, that's the only way to succeed. And I think that is changing. Now young people are being made aware of like, these various options that are available to them. And I hope that over time, that can, result in like a societal change. So people don't sort of think that this is the only way forward and that pressure is sort of reduced in that way. But yeah, I think that there is definitely a lot of work to be done with that. And again, as mentioned before, as mentioned before, the pressure is always going to be there, but it's just ways to help. How can we deal with that when you are in that sort of rut?
I think one thing that I personally think that would have been, especially to help support young people with mental health issues during exams and results, I think it's just teachers just being informed and and actually acknowledging mental health and knowing that to look for signs in their students that look, this student could be really having a stressful time. I shouldn't be putting pressure onto them. Also, just in general, I think it would have been, I mean, especially through GCSE, I think it would have just been nice to just have somebody to talk to. I mean, I think it's great, obviously, talking to your friends and such, but it's not quite the same as talking to maybe perhaps an adult that actually understands what you could be going through. And that's why I obviously think that the support, like you said, like helplines, just things that people could be people could talk to would be really helpful for young people when they're struggling to just take in about their exams and their results. Well, I think obviously we're gonna round up this podcast just about here. Is there any final thoughts that anyone would be liking to give? Obviously, this is just to do with like any of the subjects we've covered. Is there anything that anybody would like to say?
no, I think that's pretty much covered it.
That's absolutely fine. Well, from me, I would like to say that don't think that GCSE and A levels are everything. They, don't get me wrong, they are important and they will help you, but you can always resit and redo them. People, a lot, and especially teachers, will make you feel like they are everything for you, everything in this world, and they are really not. And you can, as I say, you can always resit them. And a lot of some of the most successful people in the world have neither A levels or GCSEs, I should say. So don't feel like, as I say, it's going to be everything. But if there's anything, just to finish off here, I would like to say that if anyone has any suggestions for podcasts that you would like us to discuss, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Also, if you have any questions for us as well, we will most likely be doing a Q&A at some point. So if there's any questions you'd like to ask any of the Young Advisor team, please feel free to leave a comment below. Also, if you'd like to keep up to date with us, you can follow our Twitter or Instagram, and also go to our website. We do have the links in the description. But other than that, we're just going to finish on a final quote or fact from all of us on the podcast. We're going to start with you, Bry. Is there a fact or quote you would like to give?
I'd just like to say that remember that it's not the be all and end all, and everyone does things differently, and your path will go in the right direction that it's meant to go, and nothing is worth risking your mental health. I'd also like to say, if anyone would like to get in contact with somebody to talk to, Childline are a great resource. They do an online chat where you can speak to somebody virtually, or you can ring up, and that's for anyone under the age of 19. If you Google Childline, everything will be online.
And Hanniya, anything you would like to finish on?
Yeah, so my quote would be expect the unexpected. So if things don't go as you initially planned, or they're not as you envisioned in your head, it's not the end of the world. And opportunities come from like the most random places. So go with it. And yeah, that kind of links onto Bryce's point. It's not the be all and end all. So yeah.
That's absolutely nice. I think the final quote I would like to say is that mental health always comes first. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.